So I'm going to share with you, the different types of framework, and then of course on how to actually work on the hypothesis. Only for 273, yeah, for 273. So please bear in mind there will be slight differences between the hypothesis that you are learning now in business analytic to the one that we are going to go through in research. Yeah, because for MGT555 is analytics, so the hypothesized relationship are basically the null hypothesis. Whereas in research, we are talking about the alternate hypothesis. So ada sedikit sajalah dia punya twist kat situ ya. Jadi harap faham lah. Maknanya whatever that you did in your analytics, okay, is the other way around compared to what you were doing in research. Maknanya kalau dalam analytic kita menulis null hypothesis, dalam research kita menulis alternate hypothesis. So inshallah, we'll be looking into the difference between the concept and the variables. Okay, there are so many names, okay, that being used to actually reflect the factor or the predictor. Okay, and then we're going to look into the establishing the theoretical framework itself. I don't actually expect that you will be able to understand everything because it is quite technical, because when we talk about a framework, we are talking about theory, yeah, theory. So tak nak you opening kepala, yeah, as long as like I said, if you find a decent framework that you want to apply, then use it as what you have already submitted in your draft. Okay, and then we're looking into the hypothesis and all the types of hypothesis. Okay, research framework. So there are so many disputes with regards to the research framework. Ada yang kata you don't need a framework, ada yang kata you need a framework, ada pula kata kuantitatif harus ada framework, ada yang kata kualitatif tak perlu ada framework. So there are so many disputes. But to put it into a simple way of doing things, it is better to have a framework. Because while the framework will help a reader to comprehend, dia akan membantu orang yang membaca proposal you tu, okay, what is the intention of the researcher? So the diagram will help to enhance the understanding. Kalau tak ada framework, maknanya dia kena mencari. The reader need to go through the whole write-up in order to understand what are the variables or concepts that you have placed in your research. So if you were to ask me, sir, kena ada framework ke tak ada framework? Better ada lah. Better ada, senang. Jadi kita tak adalah buang masa nak menerangkan setiap variable itu. Kita hanya tunjukkan framework dan insyaAllah kalau framework itu betul, I should be able to understand by all those who are actually looking at the framework itself. Okay, but from my perspective, framework act as a blueprint lah. Dia macam peta lah. Jadi you tengok peta tu, you tahu ke mana hala tuju dia, you tahu nak pergi sebelah mana, nak test yang mana. Kan, tapi banyak lah ya, banyak kat luar sana. Nanti bila you sambung your master atau PhD, you'll find different school of thoughts with regards to the requirement of having a research framework or theoretical or conceptual framework. So the framework offers a model of how to make logical sense of the relationship. Jadi framework tu bukan sekadar diagram, dia menunjukkan okay, what are the variables? What are the independent variables? What are the moderating variables? What are the mediating variables? And of course, what is the possible outcome or the expected outcome of your research? Jadi dia akan bagi satu logical sense. Jadi orang tengok, okay, A ke B dah ada anak panah dia. So you tahu A mempengaruhi B. Yeah, so that how framework signifies. And then it shows the hypothesized relationship within several factors or between several factors that has been identified as important in the problem. So ingat, bila kita menulis background study, we are talking about the dependent variable. But at the same time, kita selitkan independent variables. So the framework helps to portray or reflect what are the independent variables, what are the dependent variables, and maybe if you have intervening variables, it will be what we call apparent on the framework itself. Okay, the framework discusses the interrelationship among the concept of variables that are deemed to be integral to the dynamics of the situation being investigated. Ya, jadi tak ada orang baca, tak nampak juga, baca, tak nampak juga. So that create a lot of issues. So it's better to have this framework in place so that you can actually shows to the reader or whoever interested in your research, okay, I'm doing this topic, so these are the outcome expected, okay, and these are the factors that will actually influence or determine or whatever it is that you want to actually test later on. Okay, talking about the framework, there are several terms, okay, that are being used interchangeably. Yeah, ada yang kata okay conceptual framework, ada yang kata theoretical framework, ada yang kata research framework, ada yang kata academic framework. So bergantung pada situation yang you berada. Means that, for example, if you happen to actually replicate, you replicate somebody else framework, so that is merely and clearly a theoretical framework. Ya, theoretical ni, ya, dengar ya, theoretical ni adalah apa saja yang sudah pun ditest. Means that the people or the researcher before you have already tested that framework. Okay, so therefore you just replicate that framework ataupun you ambil je framework tu. Apa saja yang dah dibuat, dah ditest, yang kalau you ambil 100% itu theoretical. Theoretical, ingat ya. So kalau dia dah pernah ditest, pernah dicuba, dah ni dan sebagainya, itu dipanggil theoretical. Tetapi kalau you ambil contohnya ada 3 independent variable and then you add on another one to the framework. Okay, another variable which you take from different authors, itu dah jadi conceptual framework. Unless they have been tested together. Ya, jadi ingat ya. So nanti you mungkin akan, ini bahagian ni banyak orang confused ya. Ada yang kata theoretical, ada yang kata conceptual. So apa saja yang dah ditest is known to the society, to the public, those are theoretical. Whatever that has not been tested or the first time being tested together, itu conceptual framework. So let's see what is a conceptual framework. So basically, when the preliminary investigation reveals concepts that are difficult to operationalize, you dapat benda-benda atau variable yang use ni pun tak jelas, ataupun past researcher pun tak boleh nak define dia clearly. Okay, so the researcher will concentrate on defining these issues as clearly as possible in the conceptual framework. Benda yang tak jelas. Contohnya, you pergi car exhibition, pameran kereta. Kan? You tengok, oh ada kereta baru ni, Proton kan. Macam ni. Okay. And then dia kata, oh tak, ini konsep car. Maknanya kereta itu belum tentu wujud. Ya, belum tentu wujud untuk pasaran. Dia hanyalah konsep yang diperkenalkan. Kan, macam dulu EV diperkenalkan pada 20 tahun yang lepas, 25 tahun yang lepas ya, konsep EV. Tapi sekarang barulah ada EV ya. So itu dia panggil konsep dulu. Tapi sekarang dah jadi real, theoretically real ya. So this concept will be described in terms of the description provided, for example, by the interviewees and also from writing discovered during the literature search. Pentingnya literature, you baca. You try to identify all the variables, okay, what have been done, what have been discussed, what are the things that you need to focus on, and then you try to bring them together. So macam saya cakap, kalau you replicate dia 100%, itu theoretical. Tapi you ambil satu daripada A, satu daripada B, satu daripada C, you letakkan sekali, itu dipanggil conceptual. Okay, now we move to the concept of variables. Okay, sama juga untuk MDA 273 yang sedang buat analitik sekarang ini. Dalam analitik ada yang panggil attributes, ada yang panggil variables, bertukar-tukar nama dia kan. Okay, jadi ingat satu benda saja. Okay, whatever variable, whatever factor that you test, itu ialah you punya variables. Yeah. So the variables are also known as concept, also known as construct, are also known as a simple name as variable. Ya, jadi attributes. Itu benda yang sama. Jadi kalau you tengok data itu ada 5 contohnya, 5 kolom. So you ada 5 attributes, mana ada 5 variable. Kalau data tu ada 8 kolom, so you ada 8 variables atau 8 attributes. Ya, so 8 construct ataupun concept Yeah. Okay, what is a variable? So the variable is anything that can take on differing or varying values. Maksudnya dia berubah-ubah, dia fluctuate. Ya. Contohnya you bagi question ni, soalan satu, ada jawab 4, ada jawab 3, ada jawab 5, ada jawab 1. Ya. Dia bertukar-tukar value, dia tak sama dari setiap responden. Ya, itu dipanggil variable. So these values can differ at various time. For the same or different object or person. Kan? Dan benda tu dia, contohnya you bagi questionnaire awal tahun, dia bagi questionnaire lagi sekali hujung tahun. Kebarangkalian untuk berubah tu ada. Yeah. So example variables are production units, absenteeism and motivation. Kan, contoh kita ukur motivasi orang tu. Kan, at one point of time mungkin motivasi dia rendah. Kan. Tapi kalau you tanya dia tiba-tiba lepas dapat bonus contohnya, mungkin motivasi dia tinggi ataupun dia dinaikkan gaji, jadi motivasi dia tinggi. Sama juga kita tengok dari segi performance of employee, kita bercakap pasal commitment, engagement kan. Of course there's something, there are factors that actually influence. Kalau orang tu biasa kalau we talk about employee motivation ni banyaklah kajiannya on reward. Jadi dia dapat gaji tinggi, dia lebih motivasi. Dia dapat bonus banyak, dia lebih motivasi. Itu positive relationship. Kan? Macam you kerja lah kata, you kerja, tiba-tiba syarikat you tak bagi bonus. Mestilah you down kan, sedangkan syarikat kawan you dapat bonus. And, so dia akan berubah-ubah. Maknanya bergantung kepada situasi semasa. Okay, let us go into the type of variable. So basically dalam research ada 4 yang utama lah, 4 yang paling dominan dalam research. Yang pertama dipanggil dependent variable. So dependent variable is also known as a criterion variable. Criterion variable ataupun outcome variable. Itu benda yang sama. Benda yang sama. Jadi dependent variable, criterion variable, outcome variable. Dia mewakili variable yang sama, which is the focal point of your research. The focal point. So the dependent variable is the variable of primary interest to the researcher. Itu keyword dia. Variable of the primary interest. Maknanya, kalau you tengok satu framework itu, contohnya Abu bagi kat you framework, so you tengok. You tengok dependent variable dia apa. Kalau dependent variable dia ialah A, maka A ialah tajuk research dia. Itu yang saya cakap, kalau you buat background study, you should focus on the dependent variable, the outcome that you expect to achieve. So the dependent variables are the variables that measure the effect of the independent variable. Dia menyerap kesan daripada independent variable tadi. And it also the outcome of the changes brought about by the changes in the independent variable. Dan dia berubah disebabkan independent variable berubah. Jadi the fluctuation di dalam independent variable akan menyebabkan dependent variable berubah. Ingat itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, we have what we call an independent variable ataupun also known as predictor variable ataupun juga dikenali sebagai factor variable. So basically these are the one that influence the dependent variable. So independent variable mempengaruhi dependent variable. Kadang-kadang saya semua salah nak sebut. Sebab apa? Sebab bunyinya hampir sama. Dependent, independent. Dekat-dekat je bunyinya. Bezanya in saja. So you have to understand the independent is the one that influence the dependent. Dan sentiasa, okay, IV di sebelah kiri, DV di sebelah kanan. IV sebelah kiri, DV di sebelah kanan. So bila you menghadap you punya A4 tu, setiap masa IV you mesti berada di sebelah kiri, sebelah kiri you. Dan dependent variable berada di sebelah kanan. Okay, what is actually an independent variable? So basically independent variable is the one that influences the dependent variable either in a positive or negative way. Contoh, A dan B. A, IV, B, DV. A naik, B naik. Itu positif. A naik, B turun, itu negatif. Ataupun B naik, A turun, itu negatif. Faham So it can be positive or it can be negative. So with regards to the research itself, there is a certain requirement that you need to fulfill. In case, contoh you ambil dua variable X dan Y. teori mengatakan X mempengaruhi Y. Tiba-tiba result you sebaliknya. Ya, tiba kalau teori mengatakan X mempengaruhi Y, tapi you dapat X tidak mempengaruhi Y. So ingat, you have to find justification why that thing happen to your result. Kenapa result you berbeza daripada result semasa ataupun pemahaman secara teorinya. Jadi kalau teori kata A influence B, maknanya you kena tengok, okay, kalau you dapat A influence B, Alhamdulillah lah, maknanya consistent with the theory. Tapi kalau you dapat tak ada hubungan ataupun tak effect atau tak influence, you kena justify kenapa perkara itu berlaku. Okay, that is when the independent variable is present. Yeah, the dependent variable is also present. Itu keywordnya. Ya, apabila ada independent variable, maka perlulah juga ada dependent variable. Dan bagi setiap unit penambahan, with each unit of increase in the independent variable, there is an increase or decrease in the dependent variable. Gantunglah, kalau dia positif dia increase lah, kalau dia negatif dia decrease. Yeah. So whatever it is, remember, if you have the IV, you must have the DV. Kalau you ada IV, you mesti ada DV. Kalau tidak, you tak boleh test relationship ataupun you tak boleh test lah perkataannya, you pakai effect dan sebagainya. Because there is no outcome to predict. Tidak ada outcome to predict. So dalam normal research, ini dua yang paling utama. Untuk degree level, yes, just these two is needed untuk you punya framework. Tapi in reality, there are more variables. Okay, let's move to the next one. The next one, we call it a moderating variable. Keyword dia tu dekat strong contingent effect. Okay, strong contingent effect. So what does we mean by that? So the moderating variable is a variable that is the one that has a strong contingent effect on the independent variable to the dependent variable relationship. IV kepada DV tu, hubungan tu, tiba-tiba ada moderator. Yang hanya secara contingent sahaja. Bukannya must be there, no. By circumstances, apabila ada keperluan. So that is the presence of the third variable, which is the moderating variable, modifies the original relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable, in that the relationship holds true for some categories of the sample, but not for other categories. Saya harap you spend masa nanti untuk baca bahagian ni supaya you faham. Okay, even though you will not be doing any moderating or any mediating, but you need to understand the function and the operationalization of these different variables. All right, so that is the moderating variable. And last but not least, in the normal research, we have what is called an intervening variable, also known as the mediating variable. Kalau tadi A kepada B ada X kat bawah, dia jauh ya. Sekarang kita ada A kepada B tetapi ada Y di tengah-tengah. Y di tengah-tengah. Maknanya untuk A sampai kepada B, A kena melalui Y. Berbeza tadi A kepada B, okay, X hanya mempengaruhi dari jauh apabila diperlukan. Tetapi untuk mediator means that you have to go through. So the intervening variable is one that surfaces between the time the independent variable operate to influence the dependent variable and its impact on the dependent variable. Itu keyword dia. The one that surface between the time the independent variable mempengaruhi dependent variable. So intervening variable is both a product of independent variable and the cause of the independent variable. Okay, there is a time dimension to the intervening variable. Jadi mediator ni dia ada tempoh masa dia. Okay. Faham tak? Okay, so secara normalnya kita ada 4 variable. Itu yang asas ya. Tapi untuk degree kita buat 2 saja, IV dan DV sahaja. Tapi untuk masters dan PhD kita tambah lagi 1 atau 2. Sama ada kita ada IV, DV, moderator ataupun IV, DV, mediator. Tapi untuk PhD sekarang biasanya 4-4 berada dalam framework yang sama. And then we also have other kinds of variable, okay, from time to time, such as, for example, if you're doing finance, accounting research, or economic research, so there is one that is called a control variable, and there is also another kind of variable which was founded I think maybe 5 to 6 years back, which is called a marker variable. Ya, dua tu tak penting lah, saya fikirkan dulu ya. Yang faham sekarang ni IV dan DV itu wajib ada. Ya, and then moderator dan mediator itu optional. Tapi untuk the degree research kita tak galakkanlah moderator and mediator because it's not just simply by placing any variable. Dalam research ni bukan you boleh letak je variable tu ikut suka, no. You have to find a support. There must be a theoretical support, okay, which actually justify the needs for that variable to be part in your research. Okay, in terms of the theoretical framework, so let's see the theoretical framework itself. Okay, so developing the theoretical framework, like I said, there are so many school of thoughts. Ada yang kata perlu, ada yang kata tak perlu. Tapi kalau you tanya saya, better to have one. Why? Because it will help you to enhance, okay, reader understanding. Dia boleh membantu memudahkan pemahaman. Okay, so it's logically developed, described, and elaborated network or association among the variables that are deemed to be relevant to the problem situation and have been identified through such processes as interview, observation, and literature survey. Biasanya dalam basic research kita pakai literature lah. Means that we go through all the articles, all the journals available and everything, and then we come out with, okay, what have been done, what are the available variables, should we test this and that, okay? So it is from literature. But you can also obtain certain variable based on the interviews or observation. For example, if you want to explore something or you try to actually understand certain situation, okay, that situation might still be new. Contoh, let's say during the COVID, okay, there is no one in this world that ever anticipate that the world will shut down, okay, so rapid, terlampau cepat. So people try to understand what is happening, what is the implication, and ada yang kaji tentang implication working remotely, ada yang kaji implication dari segi mental health, ada yang implication daripada aspect of operation, how to actually help their employees to work remotely due to the lockdown. Jadi benda-benda yang baru yang orang mungkin tak boleh nak faham lagi pada asasnya. Macam kita cuba memahami climate change, kan, things change every now and then. So, kalau dulu kawasan tu tak banjir, sekarang kawasan tu banjir. Kalau dulu kita kecoh lah Kelantan, Terengganu banjir, sekarang dah berubah pula. Sekarang lebih teruk je di Johor, di Sabah dan Sarawak bila berlaku banjir. So things that change, okay, create what we call a need for a new understanding of what is happening. And pada kita bercakap sekarang ni effect after COVID lah, kita bercakap the pandemic, kesan vaksin dan sebagainya. So these are things that people try to understand. And of course with the new rapid development on the technology, we are trying to also understand the usage of AI. How does AI will help to support our daily activities, our work environment, our work schedule, work tasks. So those are the things that people try to actually understand because it is something new. So the variable might not yet exist. So therefore you might use interviews and observation in order to actually extract what kind of variables that you're going to test for that particular study. Okay, so there are 5 basic features that should be incorporated in the theoretical framework or conceptual framework. The first one is the variables. Okay, you need to consider all the variables, and then it must be properly identified and labeled. You tahulah IV yang mana, DV yang mana, moderator yang mana, mediator yang mana. And then the discussion should state how two or more variables are related to one another. Try to link. Yang ini pun saya rasa kan perlukan skill. Sebenarnya I don't actually like having the class online because I cannot see how you work. But hopefully somewhere along the line, okay, having the fact that we are online 100%, I hope that you try to uh, justify, okay, why you choose variable A, variable B, variable C, and how you relate them with variable D. So kita nak tahu macam mana you hubung kaitkan setiap variable di dalam framework you tersebut. Okay. And then if the nature and direction relationship can be theorized, kalau teori dah mengatakan positif, then that gives you, okay, what we call a confirmation of how to work on the hypothesis. So the nature and direction can be theorized on the basis of finding from previous research. Then there should be an indication in the discussion. You kena nyatakan, oh kajian lepas mendapati positive relationship. Past studies shows negative relationship. So you have to highlight that. Okay, why you need to highlight that? So that people can anticipate that you will try to yield the same result. You akan cuba mendapatkan result yang sama. Yeah. And then number 4 is there should be the clear explanation of why we would expect this relationship. Yeah. Jadi kita kena justify. Explain why we predict A going to influence B. Why we predict X going to influence Y. Yeah, so based on past literature. So the arguments could be drawn from previous research findings. Right? And the last but not least is a schematic diagram of the theoretical framework should be given so that the reader can see and easily comprehend the theorized relationship. That is what I said. Even though people might be arguing whether there should be a framework or not, but for me, I think having a theoretical or conceptual framework is the best thing in research. Okay, because it will foster and support the understanding. Dia akan memudahkan orang faham. Berbanding dengan you tulis karangan panjang, you nak kena cari pula mana dia independent variable dia, mana dependent variable dia. So yeah, that will take some time. So it's better if you have a framework, then people can just look at the framework. Okay, make all this what we call perception about your research, and then later you prove it through your findings or the analysis itself. Yeah. So those are the 5 basic features that if you were to have a conceptual framework. So in your report or your research proposal, I hope that you understand by now, the research framework should be in chapter 2. Okay, it should be in chapter 2. Dia bukannya berada di chapter 1. Not like the draft. The draft that you send me is just a draft. Means that it is like a first sharing of ideas. So once you confirm everything, you should have the framework position in chapter 2. Saya ulang sekali lagi ya. The framework should be positioned in chapter 2. Yeah. Okay, let us look at this example. So if you can see here, okay, this is basically a research pertaining manufacturing firm performance. Research ini berkaitan dengan manufacturing firm performance. Apa faktor yang mempengaruhi dia? Green supply management practices. Green supply chain management practices. Itu adalah independent variable. And you can see in the middle, there is a green partnership. So the green partnership acts as a mediating effect. So you can see that the line, you can see the line. The first relationship is on the top. The first relationship is represented by the first arrow on top. Arrow yang di atas daripada green supply chain management practices kepada manufacturing firm performance. And then the second will be the green partnership to manufacturing firm performance. Okay, and the third one is green supply chain management practices towards green partnership, which is the intervening or mediating variable. And then you can see the dotted line. The dotted line signifies the mediating effect. Means that, okay, the line should be going through green partnership. Okay, let me escape on this page so that I can actually draw. All right. So let me go to the framework itself. Okay, so this is the framework. So let me enlarge this a little bit. All right, so you can see. Can you see the diagram?
Yes.
Okay, so this
Is
is
that
the first
the
one. Okay, so this is the first one. Okay, so this is the second one. All right, and this is the third one. Nah, apa tulisannya taruh? Okay, so this is the third one. And then the fourth one, which is the dotted line. The dotted line is actually supposed to go through. Yeah, supposed to go through. Alright, so not in, bukan macam ni lah, bukan macam ni ya. Bukan macam ni, cuma ini nak tunjukkan sahaja. Alright, so it should be going through this towards the manufacturing performance. So basically, if you were to write the hypothesis, so you have one hypothesis, you have two hypotheses, you have three hypotheses, and also you have four hypotheses. Right? So that is how you look at the diagram. Okay, can you understand that? Okay, yeah,
yes, doctor.
assuming the thumbs up is real, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you can see here, even having one mediating variable also increase the hypothesis. So therefore, it is not that simple. If you want to incorporate any mediator or moderator, you must be all time aware that your hypothesis will increase. So you need more work. You need more justification. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the hypothesis development, so like I said, there's a slight difference between the one that you used to have in the 555 business analytics and in research. Okay, it's different because in analytics we focus more on null hypothesis, but in research we focus more on the alternate hypothesis. So hypothesis is actually a conjectural statement of the relationship between two or more variables, which carry clear implication for testing the stated relations. And also, yeah, the hypothesis is an unproven statement or proposition about the factor or phenomenon that is of interest to the researcher. So in other words, we are talking about a statement that you are trying to prove. You cuba nak buktikan. Yeah. So that is why it is different compared to what you learn during your analytics. In analytics, okay, there is a hypothesized value, yeah, such as the mean and whatever. You have the hypothesized value. But in research, it depends on whatever variables that you included. So it is not like mandatory. So dia bergantung pada variable yang you nak test dan you yang nak masukkan. Itu beza dia. So also when you write the hypothesis, they come in pair. Dia datang dalam bentuk berpasangan. Okay, by now I hope that you have been reading a lot of articles. Okay, remember, okay, I don't want to remind you so frequently about the need of reading the articles. So by now, if you happen to read a lot of articles, you should be able to distinguish on how the hypotheses are being written and the way that are being written. So the hypotheses come in pairs. So they have this normal, okay, what we call a pair of hypotheses, like in the analytic, okay, which referred to as the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis. Except that in research, we focus more on the alternate. So you have like hypothesis, alternate, and hypothesis null with a different arrangement. Kalau dalam analitik, null itu yang pertama, alternate yang kedua. Tapi kalau dalam research, alternate itu yang pertama, null itu yang kedua. Okay, so if you look at the diagram, boleh tengok tak? Nampak tak diagram ni? Okay, you can see how many hypothesizes, how many hypothesized relationship are there. Itu ada, you tengok National Environmental Policy, that is a moderator, and then the same thing, Green Partnership is the mediator, and you have all the existing relationship. So you have like 4 or 5 hypotheses then that you can actually answer or try to answer. Yeah. And again, okay, the dotted line represent an indirect influence ataupun indirect relationship. Okay, any questions so far? Tak ada soalan? Tak ada ya?
So far tak ada lagi, Doktor.
Okay, now let us discuss on the hypothesis. First thing first, what is a good hypothesis? Apakah dikatakan hypothesis yang baik, yang bagus? Okay. Number one, adequacy for its purpose. Okay, what does it mean? It means that it is enough to signify, yeah, the intention. Mencukupi, tak perlulah bombastic, ayat panjang, tak perlu. Very concise, precise, and straightforward. Yeah, as long as it reflects what need to be tested. So that is what we mean by adequacy for its purpose. Number two, the hypothesis is testable. Means that there is way to prove that hypothesis. Ada caranya, ada analisanya, ya, ada computationnya. Jangan dulu hypothesis, lepas tu you tak tahu macam mana nak menjawab hypothesis. Okay. And then, better than its rival, definitely lah. We talk about the null and the alternate. Okay. As far as the research is concerned, for the null hypothesis, it is always no. No means that null. Yeah. So if I were to write something, contohnya lah, katalah saya tengok sini ya. Okay. Katalah kita tengok H3. Nampak tak H3? Come on guys, you need to participate in this so that you can understand it better.
Nampak, Doktor?
Okay. Look at H3. H3 is the relationship between green supply chain management practices towards manufacturing firm performance. Okay. So how to write the hypothesis? As simple as, okay, contoh itu dekat sini ya, untuk yang H3. There is a relationship between green supply chain management practices and manufacturing firm performance. Okay. Sekejap saya buka chat box. Where? Alhamdulillah. Okay, I write on the chat box ya. Okay, can you look at the chat box?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, now, can you write me the null? Can you tell me the null? Anyone? Boleh tak? Can somebody type in the null? Hello. 42 mata yang memandang. Inilah masalah kelas online ni. Boleh tak? Can somebody tell me the null hypothesis? Kau ni tidur ke apa? Ha?
Doktor,
Hmm?
the null hypothesis ni statement yang there's no relationship between the variables ke?
Okay. Tu Farah dah tulis there is no significant relationship. Okay, yang Farah tulis tu betul. Tapi kalau yang secara direct, macam ni. Okay. Sebab apa? Sebab kalau kita letak significant, dia dah ada 1 degree. Itu dipanggil directional hypothesis. Ya, tapi sama lah ya. Cuma kena faham itu je. So when we write the alternate hypothesis or the numbered hypothesis, contohnya H3, H1, H2, so we write it in that way. There is a relationship between what and what. But if you are in the null, just add a no. Ya, letakkan no saja. Alright, thank you Farah. Okay guys, so it's different ya kalau you belajar dalam analytics is another way around, it's different. Analytics focus on the null hypothesis. Research focus on the alternate hypothesis. Okay, but the test is almost similar. The cutoff that you're using is also similar. Okay. You punya analytic dah sampai chapter mana dah? Guys? HR. Analytic you chapter berapa dah?
5 rasanya, doktor.
5 So you tengah buat t-test semua kan? Okay, so faham kan? You dah belajar 5 tu maknanya you tahu dah yang null tu equal to 0, greater than equal to semua kan? Yeah, so take time to ni ya. Just be able to differentiate lah. Okay, so let me proceed. Okay, the role of hypothesis is guide the direction of the study. Number 2, it identifies the facts that are relevant. And number 3, it suggests from which form of the research design is likely to be the most appropriate. Number 4, it provides a framework for organizing the conclusion that result. Yeah. So the hypothesis, okay, will actually guide the directional study. Means that when people look at the hypothesis, then people should be able to anticipate. Okay, so the researcher is trying to actually prove this and this. The researcher is trying to work on this and this. Okay, and then it also shows, okay, what are the variables. So if a person look at the framework itself or look at the hypothesis, then they will know, okay, the researcher will only be testing this hypothesis. These are the variables. These are the hypothesized relationship and that the researcher intend to actually analyze or prove. Okay, and of course, having said so, okay, the hypothesized relationship will also dictate in terms of the design. You nak buat macam mana, analisa apa you nak buat dan sebagainya. Right, so that is a hypothesis. Okay, so the formulation of the hypothesis, like I said, okay, depending. Yeah, remember for research, we only focus more on the alternate hypothesis than the one that are being tested compared to the null hypothesis. Okay, so there is a slight differences between the what we call analytic hypothesis as well as the research hypothesis. So this part, I just want you to go through, okay? All right. In terms of the construct hypothesis based on the objective study, so if your study is a correlational study or explanatory studies, so basically you are looking at relationship hypothesis and also the descriptive hypothesis. Okay, unidirectional and non-directional hypothesis statement. So basically, what is the difference? Kalau tadi actually there is a relationship, now you can say that there is a positive relationship. So that gives a sense of direction. Means that you know that the relationship is positive. Kalau dia negative, there is a negative relationship. Okay, negative relationship doesn't mean there is no relationship, yeah. Negative relationship means that an increase in the independent variable will result in decrease in the dependent variable. Yeah, it's just a contra value. Means that kalau independent positif, dependent jadi negatif. Dia ada naik dan turun. Tapi bukan tak ada. Kadang-kadang student kata, oh tak ada, it's a negative relationship sebab tak ada hubungan. Tak. Negative relationship is still a relationship. Kalau tak ada hubungan, itu null. There is no relationship. Yeah, so please understand on that simple thing. All right, so this is the null and the alternate hypothesis. So I hope that you should be able to master this because you need to write the hypothesis in your proposal. Yeah, sooner or later, yeah, when you have your framework in place, your variable have been finalized, you need to write the hypothesis. And of course, I'll be going through those hypotheses before your submission. Okay, so these are the example. Okay, you can look at the example. Just a simple way of writing the hypothesis. Okay? You don't need a bombastic word. Just try to be as simple as possible, easy to comprehend. Okay, coming to the testing of the hypothesis. So how do you test your hypothesis? All right, the first thing is to select an appropriate test. So what are the tests that are normally conducted in research? So basically, most of research will conduct Pearson correlation, multiple regression, okay? But you can also conduct a t-test, you can also conduct an analysis of variance, okay? And of course, when you perform the multiple regression, you have the model fit, model validity, as well as the linear modeling. And then selection of one-tail and two-tail test. Yeah, in Nippon, I think your lecturer has taught you on this. Okay, whether you should go with one-tail or two-tail test. And then choosing the level of significance. Okay. So, berapakah level of significance? Ingat lagi tak? Huh?
0.05.
0,
0.05.
0.05. Less than, ya. Ingat ya. Always less than 0.05. Yeah, remember that number. Okay, you will not go wrong if you stay with 0.05. Okay, but later I'll show you the demonstration. Okay, sometimes we use 0.01 depending. Tapi kalau you belajar analytics 0.05 lah. Yeah. So the level of significance sama. Sama ya dengan apa yang you belajar dalam analytics, less than 0.05 for significant level. Okay, and then we have the determining the probability, which is the critical value. Yang ini berbeza. Untuk analytics you compute, tapi untuk research kita ada table dia. So you can see the table here. Okay, so kita akan test pada 0.05 alpha ya. Alpha 0.05 di sini ya. So untuk two-tail critical value ialah 1.96, untuk one critical value is 1.645. Ya, tapi kalau dalam you belajar analytics, you kena kira. You compute you punya critical value T, critical value Z. Tapi untuk ni, dia you hanya compute untuk P value sahaja. Bukan critical value. Critical value is given. Okay, ini contoh bacaan dia. Yang ini pun nanti saya akan tunjuk secara praktikal lah ya, macam mana you nak compute. Because my worry is that you get tangled between understanding analytics and understanding research. Because the way things are being described or things are being explained is a little bit different. So if you look at the probability less than significant level, then you reject the null hypothesis. Okay, but if the calculated, okay, with the critical is higher, then you fail to reject the null hypothesis. Jadi nanti saya akan tunjuk cara praktikal. Alright, this one also has been discussed, okay, the type 1 and the type 2 error in your business analytics, but then we move to type 3 and type 4. But basically simple, if you get your result less than 0.05, it's significant. But if you do the other way around, so that is for type 1 error. Yeah, and if your p-value is greater than 0.05, so you reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so that will be the type 2 error. Okay, so hopefully you spend some time looking at this table, and so that you will have a better understanding later on. Okay, so the hypothesis conclusion at the end of the day, whether you will reject the null hypothesis or you will accept. Yeah. All right, guys. Any question? Ada soalan tak? How's your proposal doing? Ataupun dia ikut you cuti? You cuti, proposal pun cuti Korang kalau tanya pasal kerja, astagfirullahaladzim. Jenuh malaikat dah bagi semua 40 rumah ni. Okay, so if you have any question, then we're going to stop here. Okay, but please make sure you continue working on your proposal. Mana nak baca cakap korang pun dah tak responsif kan. Jadi try to do your best and hopefully next week I'll be able to see the draft. Saya nak tengok draft minggu depan ya. Okay, so on Wednesday I will not be around because I have to attend the convocation ceremony. Okay, when I come back on the week after, so I want to see that before you go for your break. Sebelum you break lagi cuti raya haji tu, I want to see everything is almost in place for chapter 1 and chapter 2. Ya, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Minggu hadapan. So I want all the groups to present their research proposal draft for chapter 1 and chapter 2. Research progress. Okay, guys, don't forget to verify your attendance at UFuture, and I hope to see you again next week, inshallah. All right, so till then, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.